Good morning and good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to this session, Thriving Cities, Living Waters, brought to you jointly by National Mission for Clean Ganga, the NMCG, and WRI-India. The session is being hosted by WRI-India as part of its annual event, Connect Karo 2021. I'm Ashwati Anand, a project associate with the Urban Water Program, and I will be moderating this session along with my colleague, Samrat Basak, the Director of Urban Water Program at WRI-India. In this session, our panel of eminent Indian and international experts will speak on a various range of topics on urban riverfronts and the critical ecological and social challenges along these sensitive ecotones, especially in the present day brought about by rapid urbanization, pollution, and extreme weather-driven events by climate change. Our experts of the day are Owen Richards of McGregor Coxall, Ms. Pratima Marva of Tata Consulting Engineers Limited, Dr. Victor Shinde of National Institute of Urban Affairs, Ms. Swati Janu of Social Design Collaborative, and Dr. Ian Rutherford of Alluvium Consulting. During this session, we will also launch a book developed by WRI-India for Namami Gange titled Guidance Note for Environmentally Sensitive, Climate Adaptive, and Socially Inclusive Urban Riverfront Planning and Development. To begin this session, I invite Shri Ranjan Mishra, Sir, Director General at the National Mission for Clean Ganga, to give us the keynote address. Sir is an officer of the Indian Administrative Service from the 1987 batch. Since 2018, he has spearheaded the Namami Gange program, an integrated river rejuvenation approach with multiple activities spanning 11 states of the Ganga River Basin, creating a model program for river rejuvenation in India. He has been responsible for various policy-level interventions, including the ecological flow notification of 2018, and bringing to completion multiple projects for Aviralta and Nirmalta of River Ganga. He's making pioneering efforts for developing a framework for planning for river cities by mainstreaming rivers into urban master plans. Presently, he's also in charge of the National River Conservation Directorate, looking after rivers outside the Ganga Basin. Welcome, sir. We look forward to hearing your remarks to begin today's session.
Thank you, and a very warm greetings to all the experts, panelists, and also those who have joined this very important session of Connect Karo program. At the outset, I would also like to congratulate WRI-India for completing 10 years of WRI-India. And this is also a time for me to recollect my personal association with WRI, first in Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, and also continued association in this mission, Namami Ganga mission, or National Mission for Clean Ganga. And of course, my association with CEO, Mr. O.P. Agrawal, sir, goes on for a much longer time in different positions. So I'm very happy to be part of this session, and the session is really named so aptly, Thriving Cities, Living Water, because that's the thought we all must have in our mind, because we cannot think cities to grow and water to remain healthy without thinking together, without bringing a kind of commonality of approach and action. So next, I think I will have few slides, and I will go through them quickly to draw home some of the themes or the thoughts. I think let's just give a thought on this, because you cannot think of river, you cannot take care of river unless you get one with that, and that's the idea of this thought. Again, Indian water scenario in this audience, I don't want to get into detail because you are all aware, but it's really very important for us to be cautious, to be careful about water, how we treat water, how we manage water. As we know, we are a very large country with a huge global population living in India, we do not have so much of fresh water resources in our country. So we have to be cautious and use it very, very carefully. Similarly, we are also aware about the growing urbanization. We already have a huge population of India living in urban areas, which is going to grow much more. And very soon, I mean, within a few years, more people will start living in urban India than in rural India. And what exactly, I will just very quickly like all of us to realize about the status of water. I think on the down, if you see, I mean, about the per person per day availability of water is one. But if we look at the pollution, I mean, the water quality of water bodies in our country, I think we have to be little cautious because there are several polluted stretches in the country. Several rivers are having polluted stretches, and one has to think carefully. And why this becomes important when we are talking about cities, because a very concentrated, very dense pollution comes from the urban areas. So often we look at cities as a kind of cause of concern or a cause of problem for the water sector, for the rivers. And that's why it's important for us to think about city planning, urbanization, and try to find solution also for that. And similar situation is about groundwater. We are the largest consumer of groundwater, more than India, more than USA, more than China. India consumes groundwater. So I think that's again something of a concern, and that has to be a priority. And similarly, the water use efficiency, as you would have, we all know, agriculture consumes maximum water, and then the water use efficiency is lower there, very low. And in other sector also, we have to continuously try to improve water use efficiency. Very quickly, I will like to tell about how cities are growing. It's a kind of continuum, and it is not perhaps only in India, but it will be true. The trend will be similar in several other countries also. Like we start with a small town, and then there is much more importance of groundwater, much more dependence. Surface water are basically a small ponds, water bodies, and then as we start moving, there is a shift in utilization of surface water and groundwater. I think suburbs have a different way of looking at it, and the peri-urban area, then transportation starts to, I mean, from the suburban area to core area of the city. Then we become large, and then the transportation through tanker becomes a regular business, and this starts coming. And then the pollution to the surface water also starts increasing, and this problem keeps on getting repeated, keeps on getting intensified, and keeps on getting complicated in the process. And groundwater in this whole story of our urbanization is a kind of blind spot, because the very nature of groundwater being invisible makes us not very sensitive about it. And we keep on using it as if it will never get exhausted. And I think we all understand that we have to use groundwater because, but we have to be very cautious how much we are recharging, and that balance becomes a very, very important part. And very quickly looking at the water bodies, I mean, we have seen the way we have organized, and now we have got different types of urban local bodies, different type of urban systems. And there is always a debate about what is the best way to manage the wastewater. With our experience in Namami Gange, we are trying to go for a kind of mixed use, because you have to have STPs, you have to have some large centralized STPs, you have to have some decentralized STPs, and wherever possible, the first choice would be to use nature-based solutions, whether it is constructed wetland or something else. And then from 2017 onwards, 17-18 onwards, I think there is a kind of policy intervention to also encourage fecal sludge management, septage management. The policy has come, and then that policy is also being now implemented in several states. And then we also keep on organizing training programs and take some model projects from our mission to encourage it. But what I will like to tell that we have perhaps focused so much in past about construction of capacity, STPs or other kinds of capacity, But what's perhaps more important, because when we started this mission, we also realized that only construction is not going to solve, because several of the old STPs or old infrastructure were not working. So I think we have to develop a model where performance takes a front seat and does not end with construction. And that's where we introduced the concept of hybrid annuity model, HAM, where we are actually trying to bring in the concept of performance, and 15-year O&M is part of this contract. And then we basically pay only 40% during construction, and 60% the capex also he recovers by way of annuity. So I think, and then we are also trying to bring a kind of one city, one operator approach, trying to bring mix of solutions under one umbrella. So I think that improvement in governance, because that will actually improve the health of the water bodies and help us. Now, this is another major report about global warming and climate change. The recent report very clearly says that the cities are going to play a major role in mitigating the impact of climate change. They are the major heat centers. The way we have designed our cities, the way cities are organized, or the way they develop, the way heat is generated from various activities, whether human activities or the properties, the way houses, the way buildings have been designed. And most important components in this whole story of our struggle, our fight with mitigating climate change is going to be water and vegetation. I think they will provide the much cooling effect, and we have to work on that. But I am happy to also note that WRI is also giving a lot of importance to build up this kind of thinking at the city level, because often we talk about climate change as a global phenomenon or a national phenomenon. I mean, what will be the role of India? What will be the role of other countries, developed country, developing country? But how exactly we can translate our strategy into action at the field level? What can city managers do? Do they know their role? What are we doing to really entitle them, empower them, build up the capacity at the city level? Because cities are going to be the major actor in this human journey of fighting the impact of climate change. And that's where perhaps this kind of dialogue, this kind of thing becomes very important. I will very briefly try to take you through this. This is what happens with river and cities. I mean, a river is flowing, it goes through towns, it goes through cities, it goes through villages, it goes through natural area. It does not differentiate between from where it is passing. But if the civilization which is around this, the way we organize our life, the way we develop, I think that is something which we have to understand. And then whether it's question of the quality of water, and I talked about what one can do, what one can understand about a kind of mix of solutions, whether it is solid waste, whether it is liquid waste. But again, very important thing is what we do about the flow in the river. What happens to the water which flows through the river? And that's where I think we have brought a kind of notification for environmental flow, the minimum ecological flow, which is required to keep the river floating, keep the river alive. So I think that's one idea, but actually we have to look at, and in our mission, we have taken a policy decision to look at river as one water. So whether it is main river or its tributaries or a smaller river or the floodplain or the water bodies in the urban area, they are all part of one system, and including groundwater. So unless we look at this entire thing as one system and then plan and manage them as one system, perhaps it's not going to be enough. And then I have further added, we have started in our thinking, and I'm very happy some of the partners who are also present as panelists, they will expand these ideas. But we are also looking at the riverfront, how we manage our riverfront, what we do about the water bodies in the city, and overall how we plan, how we develop master plans, and can we make these master plans river sensitive? What can we do to protect the floodplain? How we utilize the floodplain? How these floodplains can really act as, and especially the wetlands in the floodplain can act as a kind of a sponge, can actually accumulate water, and then we can use them when we really require them most. And then what kind of forestry we can do. So I think, and this story repeats, the river passes through a city, and you see all of them. It will have some area to recover, and then another city comes, brings another kind of load, and then that is how the river starts and goes. And every city has to think that you are actually hosting a river, it's your guest. When you leave that river, it should go in a healthier condition. If at least maintain the condition in which you received, and try to improve by doing various activities, and then only the cities will also thrive. Otherwise, what will happen? You will have to transport water. I mean, I know there are cities which are on the bank of a river, but that river is so polluted. Now they are getting water from Ganga. I mean, so you transport water, you develop a kind of pipeline, and then spend so much of money, and because you don't have your own water. So again, we all know, I think we in the different panels, we will perhaps we'll get into that. But I think this is something which is very important for us to develop river sensitive master plan. We have to do a kind of integrated basin management, but we have to also bring integrated urban water management. And institutional integration is also a very key strategy in that. I think there are good examples available in the globe. I think Melbourne Water is a very good example, where how storm water, how different utilities with different kinds of drinking water, wastewater, everything was brought together. There we have several such examples. How you manage a kind of develop a kind of urban river management plan or a kind of framework. What happens to the riverine ecosystem? Because often we also neglect urban biodiversity, which is again very important. What kind of ecosystem service you can get from it, and how you can keep it alive, how you can develop different kinds of infrastructure, because how you plan now will help you in mitigating several kinds of crises and calamities. This, I think, again, is something very important. We are doing it, and I'm quite sure Victor is going to talk a little more about it and share our thoughts about it. But we are trying to look at different master plans, and then working with the town and country planning organizations of different states and the cities, and trying to integrate, bring river thinking, water thinking in the master plans. There is a huge opportunity, as several master plans are getting revised, upgraded. So I think we have to catch them at that point of time, and it will be very nice to hear from some of the experiences. And the master plan will not only look at water as a kind of fragmenting thing, water as a whole, including the riverfront. And Delhi master plan is a good starting point. I have been continuously telling about water as one water, and that's where the wetlands, the major important wetlands are, which are in the floodplain. All wetlands are important, but the danger to floodplain wetlands and the urban wetlands is tremendous. And again, if you keep we all know globally wetlands are being lost at a very, very fast and alarming rate. In fact, they are being lost or they are being damaged at a faster rate than what is happening to the forest. So I think it's very important for all of us to look at that when we are looking at the cities and water together. And we have come up with certain guidelines. Again, we work with several partners and trying to take it forward to the cities to put them as a part of urban design. Now, I think this is just an example I'm trying to share with you. We are also working on water sensitive urban design and planning with the Center for Science and Environment. And a study was taken up by us in Uttar Pradesh, in a state of the 5 cities. And what happens to the open area and parks? They were all studied, and then we came out that storm water which comes, or the rainwater and storm water, if we do little bit of work in these parks and open area, you have a huge potential which is lost. 2,600 million liters of water can be stored that can recharge the aquifer. And this is the kind of missed opportunity. And what will require less than 5% of the area under parks and open space to do this kind of tweaking, these kind of interventions. So I think that is something which is very important. And this also becomes very important for us as a kind of a strategic need, because as we know, with the climate change impact, the cities are going to have more frequent extreme weather events. The Delhi, we are seeing it very, very clearly, the kind of rainfall we are having. You will have overall rainfall may not change much, but you will have intense rainfall. And then cities, we always look at this rainwater or storm water as a kind of negative thing, and we want to just somehow drain it out. But if we design properly, perhaps we can keep some of it, store them in the aquifer by using this public space, by using the floodplains, by using the riverfront. I think we are well aware about the Spawn City program. There are several possibilities of doing that. And this is a very small example. We have tremendous potential to look at, have a kind of rethinking and integrate this thing with our long-term climate leadership at the city level. I think this is absolutely understood, and it flows from that. Urban risk resilience is going to be very important, and then we have to look for opportunity. I just showed you that this storm water, this extra rain will create problem, but this will also be an opportunity if we manage it well to actually store water and then use that water in the lean season, because sometimes we will also have drinking water problem. So I think this whole approach needs to be done very nicely, and perhaps the most important player in this whole story will be people. So can we make water sensitive communities? How to connect people to the river? And then this is just to show you that there are various ways we are attempting to encourage youth, to encourage certain ex-servicemen, to have some friends of Ganga, friends of river, friends of wetland, science clubs. I think river trust, some sort of community organizations. And I think I can tell you it is not impossible, not very easy. But you the moment you talk to people and then you moment to try to engage with the ground level organizations, I think now several people are coming spontaneously to keep the riverfronts clean or to rejuvenate the water bodies in villages as well as in cities. And then today we are going to talk more about riverfront, and I won't get too much into detail because I think Pratima and Samrat, they are also going to talk about the book we are going to release. I think in our whole strategy of Ganga rejuvenation, people play a major role. So apart from making sustainable infrastructure, looking at long term, looking at ecology and flow, we always gave a very, very key position of improving people river connect. See, we have to look at river and city, river and people, and river and economy. I think all three aspects we have to look and bring them together, and people can play a major role, whether it's common people, a citizen, or urban managers. So I think that is something which is very important. And river fronts can be a very good starting point. We all know people have a kind of religious faith or cultural connect with the river. But if they go to the riverfront and they don't find enough opportunity or enough amenity, or they find it in a very bad sanitary condition, it becomes very difficult for them to keep it clean. So I think this is one. Plus, these riverfronts also serve a very important need of public space. We are densely getting urbanized. So I think this can be a very, very pleasant place to be there with them. And then we have done few initiatives. And this book, of course, I will not talk much in detail, but we are trying to look at ecological sensitivity of our planning, climate adaptation into these designs, and how it can be inclusive. Because you have to cater to make it really inclusive. And then several projects which we have done, people from all walks of life enjoy for different purpose. They come to the riverfront, maybe for cultural purpose, maybe for entertainment, maybe for livelihood. So I think we have to look at all these aspects and come up. And this book is going to perhaps fill up a very good, a very important gap which exists about thinking at different aspects and bringing them together. And I must thank WRI for supporting this activity of our mission, very actively developing this, helping us in develop this book, and all my team members who work with WRI team on this subject led by Samrat. Now this is a kind of, I will show you. Now you see a very giant turtle made on this riverfront. This riverfront we developed a few years back on in Haridwar. And this is a kind of giant turtle, and then we are working with some other agencies, and it's a very complicated, good partnership with some CSR people, CSR funding coming, some professional artists joining. And this particular turtle was made by an international artist from Mexico who came here and then made a kind of giant turtle. And this has become a very vibrant place. It's a new front. It is serving a new public space need of Haridwar city, which is growing, apart from Har Ki Pauri, which you know well. Similarly, this is another example of a riverfront, how it can change people's approach towards river and how they can enjoy the riverfront. This is again another riverfront showing the kind of waterfront transformation. There are several stories and several important things are happening in our country as well. This is Varanasi Ghat, which we know, but what you see is a kind of some paintings we did. And this is where it becomes very important. The riverfronts are basically cultural heritage. They can become a kind of, even if you create a new riverfront, you have to connect it with the culture of the area, culture of the people and culture of the city. And then one way of encouraging participation could be some of these kind of mural projects we took up with the help of some CSR funding, some support from NMCG, and also a team from Mojarto, which brought some nationally known recruited artists, as well as they encourage some local students also to join their team and then join that. So before I end that thing, I will end with this small video clip. And once again, thank everyone and look forward to further discussion with Jubilee. But primarily, we have to look at a kind of connect with the city and water together.
Coming to Varanasi, it obviously feels a lot more of an ancient way of life. Deep history, deep religious and spiritual meaning to the city.
As Mojarto, we all believe that, when people can't travel to museums and galleries, let's bring the art in public spaces.
ये कोई ऑस्ट्रेलिया से आया, कोई फ्रांस से आया है, कोई कहीं से आया है, ये हमें पता चला यहाँ बनाने के लिए।
For the victory lap though. Whoa, whoa, they ain't never seen nothing like this before. Lit the room when I came through the front door.
Street art is important because it's getting life into a city.
Train in the trees, please pardon my sycamore. Touch burning sands, cross lands and stormy shore seasons in the year, yeah.
When I paint something, there will be an impact in a large scale.
At the blood, sweat and tears and my goal so near.
बहुत सालों से मैं यहाँ पे ट्राई कर रहा था आने के लिए, पेंट करने के लिए। वाराणसी में बहुत सारे आर्टिस्ट लोगों का हिस्ट्री है।
It's majorly the people, like all of the little boys who have been helping out, and the generosity of the people, and also like the vibe of the city itself.
I know it's lonely at the town, but that's not by speculation, but the position that I got.
The entire community, all the young kids came to help. The ownership is with them now.
This is greater than trophies and saluted flags. Titles are paid, the cost is paid. Yeah.
Like wherever you are, just for 2-3 minutes, just come here. You feel good.
I've been traveling all through the ghats, walking through that, and especially when I saw this ghat from the other one, it was like so beautiful.
Okay. So thank you so much. So I think I am eager to listen to further presentations from other experts and colleagues. And the only message or only appeal, once again, I will repeat, even at the repetitive, that we have to bring that integration of city, people, and river. And river includes all water bodies. I think unless we move in that direction, perhaps we have no solution for our problems, and that's the only way to survive in future. So once again, thank you WRI-India, thank you everyone who have joined this session, and look forward to further interaction. Thanks.
Thank you so much, sir, for your enlightening remarks. We will dwell more into these thoughts and experience and perspectives that you shared and raised in our moderated discussion section. Our next speaker is Miss Pratima Marva, the Assistant General Manager at Tata Consulting Engineers Limited. She has been a crucial member in the development of the guidance note, having served as the liaison between NMCG and WRI-India earlier. I request her to now take us through the journey of the development of this book and her other experiences in development of green riverfronts. Welcome, ma'am. The stage is now yours.
Thank you so very much. Welcome to everybody, and thank you so much, Rajiv, Ranjan sir, and Samrat and Sahana for collaborating together to compile this guideline document. I just shared 2 minutes my journey throughout. Like, this baby came to 2.5 years back, and we decided, okay, we have to start, and we started collecting all the data. We started traveling together. We went to Patna, we went to Riverfront Patna, we went to Uttarakhand, we went to Jaipur, all of us together, to pick up the threads from where to start and what is our background material. And we did have series of brainstorming sessions with eminent architects together, like Amita Sinha from US. She had come down and she gave people from Manu Bhatnagar from Intact was there with us. So, and of course, how can I forget IIT Kanpur, Professor Tare. So we all collaborated together, and with our fellow young colleagues, Jyoti Verma from Namami Gange, and my other team members, while I was serving as Riverfront Development Expert with Namami Gange. The entire team, Rishabh, myself, Jyoti, we all together worked on this document, and it's a very great feeling that today we are actually releasing the book. We had a few other colleagues like Richa. She's now doing her PhD from overseas. So it was a great experience together. How can I forget Shivani? Shivani had been giving us a lot of data, and together with Victor, Samrat, and Sahana, we started our journey. So this is a good This is a good collection of a guideline document which will help us to bring more resilient riverfronts, the ecologically green riverfronts, and this will set the platform to convert the riverfronts like more of a biodiversity park than hard concrete jungle. So it was a great experience, and we look forward that this booklet will actually help a lot of municipal authorities, a lot of colleges, a lot of government officials, a lot of smart city projects. That yes, we now the need is to have resilient riverfronts rather than a hard riverfronts, and of course the connection between the river and the city is very important. Now I will just share a quick presentation, the guideline, the document which I made with my Tata team, and showcase a riverfront at Havra Riverfront under Agartala Smart City. So I will just do a quick presentation on that. Yeah. Share. Okay, let me just go. Can you see my presentation? Yes, I will just put it on now. Slideshow. Yes. Okay. Okay. So this is how it was an introduction. What are the powerful elements we have to see in a river, the evolution pattern of development, clean water interaction between river city built forms. Of course, there are many things which already Rajiv, Ranjan, Mishra sir has already conveyed. And mine is a small miniature form, which I thought as a landscape architect, which we made a document with my team back in Tata office. So with fellow landscape architect. So the important, these guidelines were made while we are designing a riverfront, like making a new project. So the important elements are ecological goals, protection and restore the natural river functions and river features, regenerate the existing elements there, and then of course make the process and the planning in the riverfronts with a broadly participatory factor. So now if you see, this is the important planning principle where we have to see the ecologically sound river and how we can design a riverfront ecologically, keeping the flora and fauna in safe, and hydrology and all these elements actually play a very important role. The relationship of city with its history is very important. We have to do a historical analysis while we are doing a riverfront. Of course, all these elements are actually part of our booklet also. And once we worked on the booklet, that helped me in making my own document with the team. Then it is important ecosystem and the natural structure of a river, the watersheds, the floodplains, the hydrology. These are all important elements which we have to keep it in mind. And how the floods actually behave with the riverfronts. What are the different seasons, how the floodplains work and they recede, and what space you get, and what all you need to take care. Then the important part is the public access and the public recreational connection with the city, with the riverfront, what we are making. These are on a bigger level, on a city level, that what are the visual connection, what are the access connection, what are the public access connection for the recreational use of the riverfront. And of course, the cultural history and the environment is very important, and how the city has evolved as a culturally. What are the different elements which we can take care while designing a riverfront? These are important planning principles. Another important is definitely the ecology, the urban agriculture, urban reforestation, aquatic and the riparian vegetation in any riverfront is very important. And the next is the climate change, how the climate change is actually evolving. I think Sir had given a very good example of that entire riverfront of Namami, entire elements of Namami Gange. That actually captures, this is a different form of it, but actually what he had shown was very important elements that evolves riverfronts actually, that helps in evolving, designing riverfronts. Then I'll come to the design principle. The design principle, the zoning, land, of course, these are important things, that how much land is available, what is the different zones, where exactly the land is. But now if I get into the design principles, yes, it is important to carve out the different levels, the different zones, which area where we can have the vehicular, where we can have the plaza, and which is with the plantation or the ghat area where it might get submerged during the water. So the land protection strategies are very important. And in fact, in our book, we actually gave quite a lot of details of, instead of making a hard edge protection, we have to get into different modes where we actually can conserve the riparian edge and have a more greener edge protections in our riverfronts. The watershed, in fact, this diagram, I took it from the book only. The watershed planning is an important element while designing it. The understanding of the buffer zone, the core zone, the human settlement zone, where we have to riparian edge, where we can plant the riparian edge next to the river, and then go up lands. So that planning strategy is important, and that helps in creating and carving out the space when we are working on a riverfront. So these are like different bits, the different standards we picked up from the different sources. And the restoration detail more about the riparian edge and the in-stream habits. The important is to make the water, the edge, the softer edge, the sponge effect is important. So maybe we can create a stream in a different angle, different riverfront in a different perspective. As a landscape architects, we can work on the engineering, and we have to look at the softer approach rather than the hard engineering approaches. These are some of the materials we can actually use to reduce the hardscapes in our planning strategies, in our design principle. Water management, of course, is very important for any ecologically designed riverfront. Then how you manage the storm water, there are different techniques. So that is an important element, which Namami Gange, we are doing it. Then as a character, yes, signages play a very important role in any signages. This is an example from Varanasi only, and in Varanasi, the artwork has come out very nicely. Apart from Uttarakhand, we did in Haridwar, and the next, I think the pipeline is Ayodhya. Lighting, of course, lighting is a character that you can change the city. Again, this is my inspirational picture from Ram Ki Paidi at Ayodhya, which will actually change the character of Ayodhya in times to come. Thank you to Namami Gange for the project which we sanctioned while in my tenure. So this will change the character. And of course, as a landscape architect, the art installation, the lighting character, everything changes in a design in a riverfront. Okay, now this I'll just flip through very quickly on the Havra riverfront. This is a green riverfront which Tata did with Agartala Smart City. So basically, this river is actually the lifeline of Agartala in Northeast, and the important element, the objectives were to restore the Agartala relationship with the Havra River, to the growth and the pattern had to be studied. And important in any riverfront is the community involvement and the participation. So these are the different. It's basically a thin river which is going through the entire city, where you have flooding, where you have the encroachments, and we studied the different 100-year floodplain, 25-year, and safe carrying capacity of the floodplain. So these are important elements which were studied. This was the land use. Of course, this is a densely populated city, and then you have to create a space along the different edges. So the land use is an important element to be studied in any riverfront. That is the first part where you start with after reviewing all your planning and a design principle. And then the theme was carved out. Of course, it's a huge city level riverfront, so that's a very different riverfront. When we do a small ghats along the temples, or when we do a small riverfront, but a city level, of course, the character changes and many elements actually come into place. So which Namami Gange, at Namami Gange, we are still doing it, like creating a children's next to the Visarjan area, a space where we can have a culmination spaces. Sorry. This is a Visarjan Ghat and a children's play area around also. So how keeping the ecology and the riparian edge and greener, softer edges, the spaces were carved out. This is the health garden. Of course, in Namami Gange also we are doing all this, the health gardens, carving out those spaces. Then the health park, where medicinal farming is there. Community participation is very important here. Then these are some of the aerial views, shots of the design. It's in construction stage, so I don't have the existing site images to show you. This is organic farming is an important element along the riverfront. So at Namami Gange also we are doing. So these are some of the inspirational design elements which was there, of course, I had a very minimalistic interaction and work into this project with the team, because I was involved in Namami Gange. But whatever I could guide them while working on the project. I used to do that. And these are some of the images of the organic farming project pictures. So this is what I have. And one thing I forgot to mention. I think, the one thing I forgot to mention, that in the book, the documentation, we actually really worked on the O&M aspect of the riverfront. Then how we create an infrastructure, but if this creation has to go a long way, that it is important the operation and the maintenance and the apart from the funding, what is done by the government of India. So we made a chapter on operation and management, so that will help, the guideline document will help different municipal commissioners into their jurisdiction, that our projects, what we do henceforth, are taken care of. So that is the key. O&M is the key for any sustainability of any project to survive in the long run and maintained very well. So I think I'll end it here. I think my 10-minute slot is over. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pratima Madam, for your presentation. We are now also joined by Dr. O.P. Agarwal, CEO of WRI-India. Welcome, sir. Dr. Om Prakash Agarwal, OP, sir, for us, was a member of the Indian Administrative Service from 1979 to 2007. He was also the World Bank's Global Urban Transport Advisor in Washington, D.C. for over 6 years and has led the knowledge development and capacity building function for urban transport in addition to advising on several projects. OP Sir has also chaired the US Transport Research Board's Committee on Transportation in Developing Countries for over 6 years. Welcome, sir. Welcome to the session. I request you, sir, to please give your remarks at this session.
Thanks, Ashwati. Thanks for that introduction. So let me start by saying that when Samrat told me that we would be collaborating with Namami Gange on this work, I was very thrilled. I was really very happy, partly because of the love for the river and what the city can do with the river, the interaction between the two, but also because Rajiv has been a very close friend and a colleague for many years. So an opportunity to collaborate with Rajiv, do something with that was very exciting for me. But having said that, something that Pratima said, the connect between the river and the city, I think that is something we recognized earlier, but seem to have forgotten now. The first few cities came up near the rivers because rivers provided a transportation system to them, rivers provided water to them, rivers provided entertainment for them, recreation for them. All of these were recognized, when cities first grew up. Unfortunately, I think with the coming of the motor car, the ICE, the need for transport through the river was no longer necessary. And that's when cities started growing outwards and growing where rivers didn't exist and all kinds of things. But I think that close relationship between the river and the city is so important. Not only does the river give to the city, but the city gives to the river. Today, unfortunately, what we've been giving to the river is all our pollution. We've been messing up the waters. That's what we've been doing. And this is something that we need to stop. We need to realize that if the river is going to be good for us, it has to stay clean. And that's the reason why I felt that, working on a project which sort of helps understand the synergies between the river and the city and how city designs near rivers can be taken up. And some kind of a guidebook on this would be extremely important for many of our cities, which are actually on riverbanks. So this is where I feel really happy that we have been part of this. I would like to thank Rajiv and everyone in Namami Gange for involving us. It's our pride to be part of this. Very happy to be on this. Thank you so much. Back to you, Ashwati.
Thank you, sir, for those encouraging and interesting remarks. I will actually now pass over the moderation to Samrat and request him to moderate for the book launch. Over to you, Samrat.
Thank you, Ashwati, and thank you, OP sir, for your fascinating remarks. I would like to request Rajiv sir right now if we can launch the guidance note at this stage. And I will also request Madhav, who is our executive director for the Ross Center for Sustainable Cities, to be part of this launch session along with other panelists. So yeah, sir, requesting you to launch the book. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot. For the next 10 minutes, I'll be talking a bit more about the book itself. But before that, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to Sir once again to provide us the opportunity to work on it. OP sir and Madhav, I know your schedules are really occupied, but it would be great if you can spare another 5 to 7 minutes to see some of the parts of the book or the thematic priorities that we have developed here with help of NMCG and of course Sir and Pratima Madam here present. So let me share my screen. So hopefully it is visible. Yeah. So I think Sir has already mentioned the city's unique relationship with river and what we call it as a riverine urban heritages. And also OP sir has mentioned that how cities has historically built up around the river primarily because of two facts: the transportation need and trade needs. And then the pattern of transportation and trade changed to more inland transportation routes, and therefore the river goes at the backyards of the cities. And the moment it goes backyard of the cities, it's out of sight and out of mind, and then the river sort of getting impacted with multiple issues. Like I'll be showing some of that. But before that, I would also like to mention what DG sir has already mentioned, the riverine cultural heritage. And especially in India, we have a deep connect with our rivers, be it Ganga, be it Narmada, be it Tapi. We have a really deep connects, both because of our religion heritage as well as our cultural heritage. We consider river as a goddess, and we treat the river accordingly. But and then rivers also bring the ecological aspect, the ecological heritage, and the environmental heritage along with it. We all know that how important is ecotone regions, floodplain, surface water, groundwater, microclimate control as part of our entire river ecosystem and in our lives. But what we are seeing in the recent days, that this riverine heritage, the urban heritage, cultural heritage, and the whole lot of investments that we make around such rivers are in danger. And the reasons are some of the visuals I would like to show here. I mean, this is a river Yamuna in Delhi, and you can see lots of frauds because of all the pollutions coming into the river. Of course, these were situation 2-3 years back, but I would still like to highlight these situations. Similarly, we are seeing the climatic whiplash. I mean, very recently we have seen the report came out through IPCC, the code rate for humanity, and it has. I mean, we used to say that if climate change is the shark, water is the teeth of that shark, and exactly what we see today in very recently in Delhi, in other cities, in rivers, riverfronts. That while we plan, design such big investments, but this is getting flooded. This is or certain times if there is no water, or if water shifts to somewhere else, then we see that riverfront with no water. And that also brings to another important aspect, the dynamic river morphology or the hydrology, and understanding of that, how it is changing over the time, and bringing those thinking and thought process into the planning of such large strategic transformative investments. Then another aspect that we quite a lot of time we do not consider is the entire social exclusion part. This is an image from another very interesting riverfront development in the state of Gujarat called Sabarmati Riverfront development. And there were, I mean, this is the entire riverfront, and there are these informal colonies, disadvantaged colonies. And once the riverfront has developed, we see photographs of this sort of things. It's very important how we can bring such kind of social inclusion into the entire concept of riverfront development. How can we make it more socially inclusive? And with all this, with this background and context, we thought of this, what's next for urban riverfronts. And we conceptualized, I mean, actually, SAR has asked to develop a guidance note on this. And we have developed this guidance note. We call it environmentally sensitive, climate adaptive, and socially inclusive urban riverfront planning and development. 3 important elements: urban, environmentally sensitive, climate adaptive, and socially inclusive. Why? Because the current urban riverfront development and planning are focused more on the built environment, that is construction, landscaping, beautification, and the potential economic benefits that to be derived from such projects. Okay, what we have seen through our research, and it was a research of almost 2 years, that there has been a very limited consideration on the social inclusion front, on the hydrological, environmental, and ecological impacts. And when we say impacts, the impacts that because of the project, as well as the upstream and downstream changes in such condition, that will impact the investment itself. So it's the impacts at both sides of the story. The objective of this document was to develop a sort of an appraisal tool to support decision making, informs the project proponent about this environmentally sensitive, climate adaptive, and socially inclusive concepts, and guidance to various other service providers and designers, planners, and implementing authorities about this sort of concepts. How to use this document? Basically, it's a primer for urban local bodies, a checklist for various URFD authorities. One thing I would like to mention here, that it does not include guidelines on architectural detailing or technical details and heritage conservation. So this was out of the purview of this document. I would like to mention that. Also, I would like to mention that while this document talks about all the 3 key components, but it is not a magic silver bullet to solve all problems. It is our first step. There has not been such guidance note available for the country. So it is a first step towards that, and we are dedicating this guidance note to the country. And also, this guidance note surely assist in developing a green, resilient, and inclusive infrastructure, intention is to provide a long-term developmental dividend to the investors and the authorities who are investing in this. So the guidance note has multiple larger framework. The first framework is the appraisal framework, basically to make sure that the proposed projects and associated investments are environmentally sensitive, climate adaptive, and socially inclusive. So the first one is the project screening, which is basically looking at very high level planning and not doing too much primary data collection or investigation, spending too much money into the planning process. And there are multiple ways to look at the project screening, and we have detailed out all such aspects into the document. And if a project passes through the project screening approach, then only we'll go to the detailed project report, which is typically a very cost-intensive exercise to understand multiple aspects. And we have also detailed out what are the various key components that needs to look beyond architectural detailing or landscape planning. And then the governance and institutional strategy that needs to be figured out as part of this entire riverfront development guidance exercise. The second one is the guidance note for implementation. Again, we have detailed out all various aspects and components of implementation level plans, requirements, actions, training, IEC, monitoring evaluation, grievance redressal, and so on and so forth. And the third one, interestingly, we also have a short framework on the operation, maintenance, and financing. I mean, while we put lots of investment in developing this sort of a riverfront, we typically think a little less in the long-term operation, maintenance, and financing. So we thought of putting some ideas, concepts, and thought process around these three aspects also. So with that, I'm stopping here, and just once again to re-emphasize that our aspiration is for environmentally sensitive, climate adaptive, and socially inclusive riverfronts. Thank you.
Thank you, Samrat. And as DG Sir mentioned, we hope this will reach a wide range of readers and people will use this document as a starting point to look at urban riverfronts and rivers, not merely as channels carrying water, but as thriving ecosystems with rich biodiversity and key social spaces of our city. We also we will take this moment to thank the team at NMCG, particularly Ms. Kakuli Siddhar, for having coordinated the efforts for this event. I do urge all of you to please access this book. It is available both online and offline, and to look through the many examples from India and international cases that are included within it. Now we shall move on to our expert panel present here and get their views and their presentations on urban riverfronts. Each speaker will have 10 minutes for their presentation, and we'll give you a reminder at 8 minutes. Our first speaker is Mr. Owen Richards. He's the Associate Director and Global Environmental Leader at McGregor Coxall, a multidisciplinary design firm with studios in Australia, China, and the UK, working on assisting cities achieve sustainable prosperity. He has over 2 decades of experience as an environmental engineer and inventor of sustainable stormwater and urban water cycle management devices. We look forward to your presentation, Owen. Over to you. Welcome.
Hope you all can see that screen. Great. Okay, thanks for having me here today. Just a couple of points, picking up on discussion already, and I hope this doesn't cut into my 10 minutes. But the most important aspect with river systems is to avoid what we call band-aiding the solutions. Avoid treating the symptoms, but rather the causes. And it's those causes that we seem to lack to understand. And that's what I'm hoping to go through today. So this presentation is going to be about regenerating the urban water cycle. And certainly 2021, what a year it's been. The increase in magnitude of floods across the world has just been enormous. But how did we end up in this situation? Well, we look towards where it all began. And in the beginning, mankind was actually nomadic. We didn't establish permanent homes or villages. We moved around all the time from place to place. Along came the agricultural age, where agricultural communities began to domesticate plants and animals. We began to settle and establish communities around rivers and coastlines. Populations increased and we started to augment the land. Along came the industrial age, and in the rural setting, the agricultural revolution helped bring about the industrial revolution. Innovations in engineering and inventions helped alter the way that we worked the land, and as a result, few and less people were required to work this land. So they started to move into the cities. Along came the industrial age, and in the urban setting, because of decline and need of agricultural workers, urban centres became even more populated and expanded rapidly to cope with this demise. In the beginning, we couldn't see the impacts just yet. The information age has made these processes even more efficient and optimised and increased in scale. Processes in human activities and processes driving efficiency, production, output and volumes even more. Today, it's seen as the plastic age, where we are surrounded by single-use objects and materials. The plastic age has detrimentally impacted our environment and destroyed habitats. Even more importantly, it's actually destroying human lives through microplastic content in foods, fish, sugar, salt, beer and water. So what is the root cause of this climate's demise? As Sir David Attenborough put it,
I have no doubt that this fundamental source of all our problems, particularly our environmental problems, is population growth.
And that's a key thing to consider here, is that population growth has been witnessed enormously and significantly across the globe. Here in India, in numerous locations, New Delhi, Ernakulam, if I didn't say it properly, Trivandrum, Chennai, but in other areas across the globe, such as Tokyo, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Seoul in Korea, and here, where I am in Geelong in Australia, although it's a lot less obvious because of our population and lower urban densities. But it appears to be actually more than that. It actually relates to the urban water cycle. With population growth, you get urbanisation. With urbanisation, you get imperviousness. The only way to manage imperviousness is through what we call drainage. How does this current urban water cycle look? Well, we have these reduced natural state processes and increased altered state processes where the impervious surface reflects the water. The only way to drain it is through pits and pipes, which sends massive magnitudes of volumes into our waterways that didn't exist before. We're still relying on outdated practices to this very day, centuries-old ways of draining our environment. And in fact, in the education system, engineers today and tomorrow are still trained to design stormwater pipes big enough. And engineering actually has a cause problem, as quoted by Theodore von Karman, is that engineers actually create the world that has never been. And this is where the problem with stormwater is created. And this is actually something Sir David Attenborough agreed upon, although he hadn't actually looked into it as much. So what are the impacts? Well, we get loss of habitat, loss of green space in urban areas and agriculture, loss of water sponges, where the water is just reflected and sits on the surface, loss of life. So as presented in Dubai in 2017, they get an average of 11 deaths per year in a sandy, arid environment from flash flooding. Increases in urban heat. And in Shanghai, they've undertaken studies that actually confirm impervious surface has a positive correlation with land surface temperature and a negative correlation with vegetation and water. And they're the important things to remember here. But what currently makes integrating stormwater so challenging? It's our reliance on conventional approaches, conveyance principles and end-of-line management. End-of-line solutions, large solutions, high pollutant loads to one solution area, infrastructure costs, management costs, etc. In India, direct connections to waterways are an ongoing issue and challenge, and detrimentally impacting this environment and its function. The other challenges in India are a lack of environmental considerations in the planning, construction stages, lack of best practice stormwater management and stormwater knowledge, institutional coordination, culture, operation and maintenance of infrastructure, complex political, legal, cultural backgrounds, lack of hydrologic data, drainage network records, miscommunications between all disciplines through a project stage, poor understanding of these roles and responsibilities. So how do we undo these impacts? Well, we look to undo the imperviousness, or how we've crusted the environment. In the agricultural sense, how those grounds have been compacted and we try and uncompact them. In the urban sense, poke holes like Swiss cheese in our urban environment to let the water soak back in. So in the urban sense, revegetate, but also we need to look at the soils and the porosity of these soils and how they actually support the growth and sustainability of these green infrastructure systems. In the agricultural context, this is where we look to holding back the water, utilize it more to sustain a more thriving agricultural landscape rather than just a single use aspect towards water, as well as we do with other products such as plastics. How do we undo the impacts? Oh, I just covered that. So this is through water cycle and landscape regeneration, and there are two contexts. There's the rural context, and I don't have much time to cover that today, but in essence, what does this look like? In the mid-1970s, Australian farmer Peter Andrews released natural sequence farming, and you might see a lot of this in projects in India going forward. This is what we call water-sensitive urban design for the agricultural landscape. But in the urban context, what does this look like? This is called water-sensitive urban design, where we reintroduce the natural water cycles within this environment and integrate the engineering infrastructure with water landscapes, open spaces, soil and vegetation. How do we do this? Well, this is a principle I devised in 2016, is we look to source control for stormwater management, but at the smallest possible scale possible. So this is called snowflake management, where we manage rainfall in the smallest, easiest possible scale. And that is easy to manage snowflakes, low cost, low volumes, etc. The more that flows accumulate and sent down the stream, the harder it is to manage, the more volumes you have to deal with. It's also moving from grey to green. It's integrating blue and green infrastructure to what we call living infrastructure. It's where we look to maximising integration of vegetation, soils and water systems. This is actually a common goal across India currently through blue-green infrastructure in cities by 2030, which isn't that far away. So there's a lot of work to be done. But most importantly, it's through creating healthy soil, because without healthy soil, you get compacted, dry, lack of nutrients, lack of water. The water is reflected. Without that, the green infrastructure will not be sustainable. How to apply it? It's through a methodology, a device called water planning, but we need to confirm what is actually in the environment. We can't just make assumptions. We need to confirm what is the geology like, what is the soil porosity like, and then we undertake a micro catchment. So we don't look at things at a regional scale. We zoom in as far as we can and see how can we most maximize the reuse and recycling of our water systems. And this is called a micro catchment assessment. So just a pretty broad diagram here of different scales within our urban development that we look at. Through source control, actually multiple benefits here of low capex, easier to maintain, improved amenity by decoupling public open space, and easy integration with alternative water sources because it's right there where it lands. What might this look like? Well, there are unique individual responses, and we call this utilising a toolkit of best management practices to devise bespoke regeneration solutions responsive to, as I explained before, the actual geological and environmental conditions of where you're working at. This is the problem with age-old drainage infrastructure. It's just rolled out everywhere, and the same solution doesn't work everywhere. Mother Nature is very complex, so we need to manage our solutions in the same way. It's based on an old accounting sustainability framework called 3BL, triple bottom line of social, environmental, economic. But actually today, with the Internet of Things and invisible infrastructure, there's been a smart element brought to this framework. So there's actually turned into a quadrant now. How do we apply it? We take the framework, methodology, and our toolkit, and that's where we devise these solutions to generate unique, cost-effective solutions responsive to that immediate environment. Some B&P examples, there are so many, but it's about holding the water back in the environment, utilising that water, maintaining these healthy green ecosystems, some examples here of rain barrels, where I see in the current images that have been provided to me on a project that we're doing for Awasi, is that the downpipes from a roof lights go straight into a drain and run very quickly into the waterways. So we just hold that back and utilize it more. An example of a source control retention system within urban environment. A technology that won me an award back in 2015 in Perth, which is just using bio-retention trenches and stone aggregate, because stone aggregate is very porous, so it takes a very high uptake of runoff. My first invention of a continuous aggregate inlet, which was actually responded by Professor Tony Wong in presentation in China as a very leading biomimicry device. My second invention, a tree nurturing system, which introduces more climate adaptive processes as well. What might this look like?
Sorry to cut you there, Owen, but we're running out of time. Can I request you to please wrap up soon?
Yes, yeah, I'm only a couple of slides away.
Thank
it means turning this into this, turning this into this. But what's holding us back? It's our lack of interdisciplinary collaboration from the very start. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Owen, for your presentation. I'll now request Dr. Victor Shinde of the National Institute of Urban Affairs to give his presentation. Dr. Shinde brings to the session almost 2 decades of work in the water and environmental engineering and management sector. He currently leads the water and environment practice at NIUA, India's premier think tank on urbanization under the aegis of Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. Welcome, Dr. Shinde. The stage is yours. Victor, you're on mute. If you could.
Right. Okay, great. I think this is good.
Yes.
Yes, thank you so much. Right, so Ashwati, thank you so much for that introduction. And on behalf of NIUA, I also want to congratulate WRI-India on completing 10 years here. And it is such a great pleasure, for me to be here, in this Connect Karo. Like Rajiv sir said, it's a very catchy title that's given. Like Thriving Cities and Living Waters. It's such a beautiful title, and I must commend you on coming up with such a wonderful title here. Yesterday night I was just flipping through the document that was just released today. As panelists, we had a little bit of a beforehand access to this document, and what I really liked was, although this document is on the riverfront aspect, like the interface between the river and the cities, it just does not only talk about the river zone, right? It actually forges synergies with the rest of the city. And I think that is so important because, when you look at a river, it has to be looked as a system. And Rajiv sir very correctly pointed out that, it requires multiple aspects, multiple considerations, in order to actually manage a river properly or judiciously. Right? So I'm going to be talking a little bit on that regard, and in terms of how do we actually go about managing, an urban river. And this comes from a framework that NIUA and NMCG, we jointly prepared some time back. Well, not some time back. It took us almost a year to prepare that framework, which is called the Urban River Management Plan. And then I'll explain that in just a bit. But the idea was that plan, we implemented it in the city of Kanpur. So Kanpur is actually the first city in India to actually have the Urban River Management Plan. And I want to share some insights that we got, right? There was a lot of learning that we got from that. And just 3 main insights that I will share with you today, right? But before that, like I said, this framework that we prepared in association with the National Mission for Clean Ganga, it's called the Urban River Management Plan Framework, or the URMP framework. It's a pretty elaborate framework, but what I have put on the screen is the heart of it, right? So essentially, at the heart of the whole framework is that cities need to take actions against these 10 items that you see on your screen, or these are also the 10 objectives of any particular plan. So while the objectives are the same, the cities can actually choose, the contextual actions that they take, under each category. And as also you see, there are these 3: environment, economics, and social, deriving from what what Owen just now presented about the triple bottom line, right? Now the reason for this is, typically when you consider river management, it is always looked at from an environment perspective, right? That's the traditional thinking around it, right? But in order to give it that sustainable nature, right, in order to ensure that the river is taken care of, for a period of time, we thought it was very important also to bring in the economic and the social element into it, right? So which is why this framework that is here, it kind of encapsulates, or it is centered on the principles of sustainable development here. Right. All right. Yeah. So this framework is actually available on the NNCG and the NIWA website. It was launched last year by the Honorable Minister. I think this was in November last year. And please feel, anybody who wants to, please feel free to take a look later. Right. So like I said a little while ago, right? So the framework part was fine, that was theory, right? But now how do we actually get it into practice? And we thought it might be good to implement this whole framework into one city, right? And Kanpur was a city, that was chosen for this purpose. So we worked very closely with the commissioner of the Kanpur city and the various departments and agencies who are concerned with river management. And again, in a snapshot, this is what they came up with, right? So the city of Kanpur came up with 19 interventions that it would take, or that it would do, under the first version of the Urban River Management Plan. Now, this Urban River Management Plan has been designed as a very quick action plan. So that's why you see on your screen are very actionable items, that the city is going to take over the next 3 to 4 years, in order to kind of enhance that outlook for urban river management there. The yellow boxes that you see, so these are essentially the enabling actions that the city is taking, like creating river-related planning regulations in the master plan, or developing a scientific water balance, right? So this is more of a preparatory mechanism, which then actually helps inform a lot of other decisions related to river management. What you see in green, are the very quick actions that can be taken, perhaps over a year, maybe a year and a half, max 2 years, right? So there are certain of these kind of actions that the city also identified. The ones you see in blue, the dark blue, these are the ones that might take a little bit more time, right? So these are, well, in context of this plan, these are the slightly long-term interventions that they would take. What you see in the light blue, the bottom row, 14, 15, and 16, right? Now these are specifically related to the economics, right? To generating the river-related economy, or reviving or enhancing the river-related economy there. And on the right-hand side of your screen, 17, 18, and 19 are essentially the social mechanism, or the social actions that the city has actually taken, has decided to take, under this urban river management plan. Right. So, like I said, the plan is done, and I think next month we will be also officially launching it. We're just waiting for some confirmation on some dates. But then, like what I mentioned earlier, like over the last 1 year or maybe a year and a half, we've been working so much with the cities that there are a lot of insights that we have got, a lot of lessons that we learned. And I thought this would be a great platform to actually share some of those insights, right? Number one, what we learned, and while the framework was designed to be like this, it became very evident that preparing an urban river management plan is a lot easier than it appears, right? So if I go back to the previous slide, and if you just imagine that, right? So there were interventions all across several sectors. Now it might seem intimidating to begin with, right? But in reality, it is not. The reason is because there are a lot of synergies. In fact, all right, let me just show you this, the slide here, right? There are a lot of synergies, of these actions with some ongoing initiatives that the city already has. For example, if you look at intervention number 1, which anyway goes into a master plan, a city has to prepare a master plan anyway, right? So the idea is, just integrate river-related thinking into existing master plans. Likewise, if you look at number 3, for instance, right? which was on fecal sludge and septage management, right? This is again a part of a sewage management officer state. This is their job anyway, as part of the municipal corporation here. Likewise, number 5 and number 13 are related to solid waste management. Number 10 and number 11, are related to service level benchmarks. In the Indian context, every city needs to, should aspire to achieve a certain level of service level benchmark. Right? So pretty much all of these are related to ongoing activities in the city. Likewise, there are a number of popular urban missions that the Indian government has launched, and a number of the other interventions, the remaining, can actually fit very well to those ongoing missions. Like number 2 and number 6. This clearly fits very well into the smart cities mission, and that is how they have done it. They have tied it to the smart cities mission here. Number 7, number 8, and number 12. Right? Again, these feed directly into the actions that can be taken under the Jal Jeevan Urban Mission, which was just recently launched in February this year. Likewise, number 4 and number 19 again. So this comes under Swachh Bharat Mission. Right? So through this, I think the point I'm trying to drive here is, most of the actions that are required to be required for urban management or proper urban river management, are already taken by the city. There's just a need for a coordinated effort among the stakeholder agencies, in order to ensure that systems thinking, is used, while implementing the different options here. So, like you see, 80% of the interventions are already there, and it's the remaining, which are a little bit of a standalone interventions that the city will take, in the years to come. The second learning that we had is, and this is important, that a precursor to managing the urban river is actually to create a value for it, right? Because, as the adage goes, what you value, you cherish, and what you cherish, you will take care of ultimately, right? And at the end of the day, that was the whole objective of the plan, is that there is a harmonious relationship between the city and the river, right? So now here I must mention that I'm not talking about the spiritual value here, because again, from our experience, what we have seen is spiritual value is not a very good indicator of whether a river is taken care of well or not, right? Otherwise, we won't have those pictures that Samrat just shared, those frothy waves in the Yamuna. So here we're talking about a value that is a little bit more sustainable, that people, a large section of society can actually identify with and leverage on, for the entire duration of the year here. So what Kanpur has done is, I'm just sharing a couple of examples here. What you see on the right hand side of your screen, is the Atal Ghat, a very popular ghat that is in Kanpur, and there's a large area behind it which is largely unutilized, and currently is serving as a site for solid waste dumping. So there's a lot of solid waste that is actually dumped there. The city has decided to take up that entire area and turn it into a riverfront park. Pratima showed us so many examples of wonderful designs, right? So I won't get into the details of this, but the idea is, converting that wasteland and the land adjacent to the river into something that citizens will be able to use, or residents will be able to use, on a very consistent basis throughout the year. Another interesting thing that they are attempting, or they have decided to do, is to have a cultural theme boat ride, along the Ganges, along the Ganga. Now here, just to give you a brief background, a few kilometers upstream of Kanpur, is a city called Bithur, which has a wonderful cultural significance or religious significance as well. Love and Kush, the sons of Ramji were actually born in Bithur, right? So there is that very strong cultural connect that place has, and then the city has decided to kind of leverage on that, through a themed boat ride, very similar to what you find here in Akshardham in Delhi, right? And finally, number 3, what we also realize is, managing an urban river is an incremental process. Some of the interventions can take place quickly. Yes, we understand. And this is really important in context of the urban river management plan, because while this has been designed as an action plan that has to be taking place over a few years, there are certain actions which will require a little bit longer. So let me give you an example. One of the interventions that Kanpur decided to take
I'm
up.
sorry to cut you there, Victor, but I'll have to request you to wrap up.
Sure. I just this is the last slide anyway.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah. So, well, just one more after this. The idea is, they decided that they want to do a bit of a riparian buffer zone, which Pratima also mentioned about in her presentation. But what you see is, these circles that I have pointed, that I have marked, a lot of the area is already encroached. The floodplain is right up to the edge. So it's not going to be very easy to kind of remove them overnight and then replace them with a riparian buffer. So what Kanpur has done is, they're doing it in an incremental fashion. So they've identified certain pockets. There are 13 here, and this is along the Pandu River, where they will now, incrementally over a period of time take up these 30 meter riparian buffers, and in the process, for the areas that are encroached, where it is not possible, they will now rely upon the master plan, a very similar approach that the Delhi master plan has used. So when those areas come up for redevelopment, this 30-meter buffer would be in the plan, so that the development doesn't actually happen in those areas, right? So finally, just one last minute, and just to say, the idea of actually presenting this, and I hope some city officials are also watching this, this seminar, is that it's not very difficult, it's not very overwhelming to prepare an urban river management plan, and it just takes a coordinated effort, like Owen also pointed out, and certainly it can be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shinde, for your presentation. Our next speaker is Ms. Swati Janu. Swati Janu is an architect, an artist, and a writer based in Delhi, whose work engages with social justice and participatory planning. She's the founder of the interdisciplinary practice Social Design Collaborative, which was recently awarded the Beasley Prize Design of the Year 2020 in Architecture. Her approach combines community engagement and grassroots activism with policy advocacy, for which she regularly works as a technical consultant on affordable housing and inclusive urban development projects. She's written on urban issues ranging from housing rights to public spaces for City Lab, Scroll, and the Indian Express. We hope to hear more of her work from her with vulnerable communities in Delhi living along the river Yamuna. Over to you, Ms. Janu. Welcome.
Thank you, Ashwati, and thanks to WRI for inviting me to bring the focus to social sustainability, the social aspect of sustainability. So I'm going to talk about Delhi, and for those of you who are familiar with Delhi, you know that the river Yamuna passes through the heart of it. Now, what is the relationship between the river and the city in Delhi? It is essentially a backyard to our city. The 2% stretch of Yamuna that passes through Delhi is responsible for almost 80% of the population. Most of us know this already. This is the stretch in the north of the city where the river enters the city. This is the Wadirabad barrage, somewhere here. And you can see how the river is changing its color as the industrial effluents and the residential sewage enters the river here. So you can imagine what the relationship of the residents with the river is. We all have our backs to the river, and the only time we really see it or maybe even think about it is when we cross it over a bridge, either through our metro coaches or through our car windows. And I think one thing that we need to remember is that this is not Delhi's Yamuna. It is Yamuna's Delhi. The city is because of the river. And the river is not because of the city, which is something that we forget sometimes. So who are the people who have had the longest standing relationship with the river? These are the farmers and the fisher folks. This is something which is not very known about the city, but there has been farming which has been going on the floodplains of the river for many decades now, from pre-independence times, but especially after independence, a farmers cooperative was formed. Today, if you look at the extent of the farmlands on the floodplains, you'll see it's diminished, it shrinked rapidly. So we mapped through satellite imagery, we mapped the extent of the farmlands on the floodplains, starting from 2000, when it was 50% of the floodplains, to 2020. Today, it's only 1/3 of the floodplain, so about 3,000 hectares. And so why are the farmlands reducing? That's because the farmers are considered as encroachers, because the farming is primarily on public land which belongs to DDA. But it's not as simple as that. We need to understand a bit of the history behind it. So the Farmers Cooperative that I was talking about was formed in 1949, and DDA used to be then known as the Delhi Improvement Trust. So formally, there was a formal system of farming, which was a framework of farming, which was established by the authorities. And short-term leases were given out through the cooperative to farmers. So these were 5-year leases. The cooperative is called DPCMS, Delhi Peasants Cooperative Multipurpose Society. And the system was stopped in 1966. So for 17 years, these leases were handed out. However, the system continued informally, meaning to say rent kept being collected, even though fresh leases stopped being handed out. The cooperative kept collecting rent from the farmers up till as recent as 1994. So the farmers today on ground have the receipts for these rents. So it entered a sort of a gray zone as things happen very often in our cities. And over the last decade, what has been happening is that the farmers have been facing evictions. And this is because our imagination of the riverfront has changed from a riverfront where farming was encouraged to a riverfront where we want to have more activities. There are biodiversity parks which have been proposed in the last master plan, which is a very good idea. The latest master plan talks about public spaces, which is again much needed. The previous master plans have talked about channelization of the Yamuna. The master plan 2001 spoke about concretizing it and building an amusement park like a Disneyland. Fortunately, that idea was dropped, and we have moved towards ecologically more sustainable ideas. But at the same time, we are leaving behind the communities, the people who have been intimately connected to the river, who sustain on the river, and the river sustains because of them. So if you look at the extent of the farmlands today, this is what it is. And if you consolidated all of it, it forms approximately a 5 by 6 kilometer space, which can cover Lutyens, Delhi, the center of our city, as you can see. And this space, this piece of land is directly linked to the unit area of farming, which is 1 acre, which translates in local units of area to 5 bigha. So today, if you see on the Yamuna floodplains, the minimum unit of farming, the minimum size of land that farmers are tilling is 1 acre, because that's the minimum area that you require for subsistence. And this, we realized, this unit of 1 acre is also linked to family sizes. So there are 2 adults in a family, then they are tilling 1 acre. If there are 3 adults or 4 adults, then it becomes 1.5 times or 2 times, which becomes 2 acres. So you can see the relation between land and labor. And this is very important to understand. So what our team has been working on is highlighting the importance of food production, the contribution of the farmers to the city. We have been able to map the different crops which are being farmed along the river, the flowers, and all the knowledge that today I think is classified as permaculture. This is the indigenous knowledge that we already have, the farmers already have, but we seem to have forgotten it. And I almost think that it will be repackaged to us. It is already being repackaged to us, almost like yoga has been repackaged to us and imported back to us from the West. And these are concepts which are being talked about while forgetting that we already have these practices which are being actively removed. So how can we value them, and how can we integrate them with our future imaginations of the riverfront is what we have been talking about. And here, some of the things that we've been looking at is also how these the crop production cycles have changed. The farmers are now growing vegetables which only take 2 months to grow because of the regular evictions they are facing, because of the demolitions. So if you have grown something which takes 6 months, and if the demolition happens in the 5th month, then that's a huge loss to the farmers. It's also important to see how the farmlands are connected to the vegetable markets. And unofficially, because there hasn't been a lot of data on this, a lot of surveys haven't been conducted officially yet. We know informally that about 20% of the vegetables being produced in the city come from along the Yamuna. And this was really helpful, especially during the pandemic when the state borders were sealed, and it was because of the food being grown here that the adjacent neighborhoods had access to fresh vegetables. So can we imagine a food secure future that integrates the farmers of our city? These are the questions that we have been asking. And also, the world over, urban farming is becoming a buzzword. So we already have these practices. Can we integrate these practices? In fact, urban farming in the way that we have it in Delhi is really sustainable. This is not the kind of farming where you are talking about terrace farming or vertical farms. These are farmlands on ground, and present sustainable models. So what is happening today is because of the Yamuna Riverfront Development Plan, they are facing regular evictions. And the plan itself talks about very important things, such as public spaces, such as parks, jogging tracks, cycling tracks, and all of these are much needed. The city, especially central part of Delhi, East Delhi, is much starved for open spaces. So these are the kind of open spaces we need. But at the same time, are these going to be spaces only for a few? Because on the other side of these plans is, is what we see every few weeks when farmers' houses are being demolished, the farmlands are being bulldozed over. And so if we look at what exists on ground today, this is the Golden Jubilee Park. Many of you will be familiar with it. Yamuna Pushta used to be here, and today this is a beautiful garden. At the same time, compare this space to this space. Now, these are the farmlands which exist today, and they're going to be removed to create this. And you can see how they coexist, but this is not by design. This is coincidentally, this has happened, that what is being planned, what is being built phase-wise, seamlessly merges into what exists today. But it makes you wonder, do we need to have parks versus farms? Can we not have parks and farms together? And this is the sort of integrated vision that many of us have been trying to talk about. If you go to this park, the Golden Jubilee Park, you will see that the people who are working in the park, who are cleaning the pond, who are taking care of the maintenance, are the farmers themselves. And this is something which has happened naturally. Can we formalize this? Pratima was talking about O&M, operation and maintenance. This is the best way to go ahead if we have an integrated vision of O&M.
Hi, Swati. Sorry to cut you there, but can you please wrap up?
Okay.
Thank you.
So this is the integrated vision that a few of us at a civic campaign called Maybe Delhi have come up with, which is, can we have parks and farms both? A few of these suggestions were shared with DDA NIUA. Victor has been a part of these consultations as well. And for the first time, this master plan acknowledges the presence of agriculture and allows agriculture, which is a great progressive move ahead. But at the same time, we need to create regulatory frameworks urgently before the farmers are removed. Other cities have done it. Kolkata today produces 50% of its vegetables in its wetlands within the city. Mumbai has farms along railways as a way to prevent, build encroachment. Can Delhi continue to protect its custodians of its river? These are the true friends of the river. And can we imagine a food secure future where 50% of our vegetables are grown within the city? Can we work together towards this sort of a vision? Thank you for listening, and sorry for taking more time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for this really in-depth presentation on the lives and livelihoods of the communities living along the river, Swati. I now request our last panelist, Dr. Ian Rutherford, to give his presentation. Dr. Rutherford is a fluvial geomorphologist with extensive experience working on the geomorphology and the management of streams. He's a professor of the Department of Resource Management and Geography in the Melbourne School of Land and Environment. He's also the Director of Research at Alluvium Consulting, which is an industry leader in waterway management, urban waters, and environmental waters. Please go ahead, Dr. Rutherford.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'd like to thank WRI. I'd like to thank my colleagues who've spoken before me, and I would just also like to congratulate Pratima on the Riverfront report, which has just been released. We got a version of this yesterday, and I was very excited to read it, And in fact, I completely rewrote my talk after doing that because I think it's such a great report and very relevant to Australia as well. So I look forward to sharing that. Can we share that now? Is it? It's publicly released? I'm assuming we can share it. So what I'd like to talk about now is when can we make room for rivers? So the guidance note emphasises the importance of riverfront areas, particularly for Indian culture and communities and the spiritual connection and cultural connection. And my colleagues have said, emphasised that point as well, just how important these river frontage areas are. But I'd also like to reflect on some of the other things that have emerged from other people's talks, and that is that sometimes you actually don't want to build too close to the river. And so sometimes the river fronts might look a bit different. So that's going to be the theme of my talk today. I want to talk about gradients of processes to start with. And we can think about urban gradients. And the first one I'll mention is the longitudinal effect of towns on water quality, for example. And I think this is, I'll become clear why I'm saying this, but we could call this the urban river continuum, if you like. And this is a really beautiful study from Poland, actually, which talks about this water quality variable and how it goes, how the cities that go down valley accumulate the pollution. But importantly, the spikes here are the towns or the cities, and between them you get recovery. And so longitudinally, what's really important is not just the impact of the city on water quality, but also how it recovers between those points. And I think that's really important for the very impressive Ganga program. And, for example, getting targets for master planning that relate to this continuum down the valley. But these gradients also relate to individual cities as well. And this gradient from the edge of the city through into the city. And that's what I'll talk about now. So here's an example of a gradient. I was trying to find one from India, but this is a good one from just outside my window here, which is the Yarra River here in Melbourne, not too far from where Owen is as well. And this is, the river here is flowing from right to left into Melbourne. And there's a very strong environmental gradient along there. This is work by Chris Walsh and colleagues, and where the river is flowing from right to left. And the measure of urban impact here is the proportion of total imperviousness. And the measure of impact here relates to the diversity of sensitive macroinvertebrates. So it's insects in the water. So that's just one measure. We could use platypus, we could use fish. It'd be all the same effect. And what you see is as you get towards the edge of the city, the imperviousness increases and the proportion of sensitive taxa decline. So it actually falls off a cliff right at the edge of the city. And once you get to a quite low imperviousness, the biodiversity of the stream has collapsed essentially. And so this gradient is really powerful across the city. And the more imperviousness in the catchment you get, the worse the environmental condition. So that's important for understanding planning. I'll come to that in a moment. So these urban water gradients don't just relate to biodiversity, they relate to pretty well all the things we've talked about today. Floods tend to increase in gradient down valley as we get more urbanisation. Water quality, of course, declines. We get biological values declining. We also get a decline in essentially the freedom of the river to move in a lot of ways. So certainly in Australia, most urban streams are channelized. They're concrete or they're stabilized so they don't cause trouble. And we also tend to get often a decrease in social amenity values as the stream gets more constrained and declines in condition, more waste and so on. So there are these strong gradients as we move down valley in a stream system. But many of these gradients can be moderated by having more space. And this is really the theme I want to talk about today, the importance of space. And for example, floods, you can dissipate floodwaters with more space on the floodplains. We all know that, We also know, and in this the river frontage document we're looking at here, the fact that all of these cities are right up to the edge of the river means there isn't any space. So that's the problem. How do you dissipate floodwaters when you have no floodplains? Similarly, you need space to treat water and stormwater. So I'm talking about sewage treatment works take space, stormwater needs space to be managed. Owen showed that you can manage some stormwater in small areas, but accumulatively you need quite a lot of space to manage all the stormwater that a city produces. You need space for organisms. So if you are going to improve the water quality, you have to have biological spaces, and that's not just in the streams, but also on the floodplain for vegetation, for animals, and for all of those systems that rely on the aquatic system. As a geomorphologist, I'm also enthusiastic about freeing rivers to move. I think of most of our rivers, certainly in urban areas, and a lot of rivers in the world are prisoners. They're locked up, so they can't move around and perform their functions. And that's not just a geomorphological issue. Static, dead rivers, eventually become dead. They need to move around to be resuscitated, if you like. So I'm all for freeing rivers. Similarly, we need space for recreation. And thank you, Swati Jani, for your talk that you just gave about the conflicts around open space along waterways. And so I'll come back to that one in a moment, because that was a really fascinating example of what I'm going to talk about. Now, in the guidance notes, it makes mention of the room for the river idea, this notion that we should make space for the river. Now, in Delhi, we seem to have space, and that must be because the floods are so intense there that was reserved. But most of the urban areas, we don't have space like this. This is the classic example from the Netherlands, where they bought this land back and turned it back into floodplain. Billions and billions of dollars, or euros, that cost. Japan is probably the preeminent example of this, where they've got all of these buffer zones and along their channelized waterways. I wouldn't say that they're particularly environmentally sensitive, but they're there for flood protection. And that's also, if you want to play baseball in Japan, where do you go? You go down to the river and you play baseball, and that's where all the sporting fields are, along the waterways. Similarly, in Italy, they're moving towards 150 metre buffer between urban areas and the river. So this is a common proposition globally now. In the guidance notes, there's also reference made to this American example, where we've got corridors joining the river. So there's a riparian area along the river. This is the US example. And then joining up with other corridors along streams and tributaries. So they become the arteries of value, public space value. But the problem here is that doing that, as we know, is extremely expensive. It's almost prohibitively expensive in a lot of ways to actually produce those sorts of corridors. And there's another example from an earlier talk, really interesting case. I think, Pratima, this is your one, about the riverfront development. Again, if you don't have that space and you have to buy it back, it's almost prohibitively expensive once the city is developed. Other examples, there's this water-sensitive plan that Alluvium was involved with the Andhra Pradesh government, where they're attempting to improve the water quality and the environment. This is water-sensitive design at its best, you've got riparian areas, you've got ponds, you've got sewage treatment plants, and all attempting to deliver better quality water into the Krishna River. But this is prohibitively expensive to pull this off when you've got such high-value urban areas. And we've also touched on the point, a few speakers have, on the social justice implications of doing that. It's often you do these sorts of things, if you like, for the people who are rich, and it's often the poor who are the victims of these developments, not always. So achieving water-sensitive cities without some space is difficult. So getting the space retrospectively is expensive. So what do? Well, we know about the rapid growth of Indian cities, and this is when buffers need to be reserved. This is Chandigarh here, and you can see from 1990 to 2017 the incredible rate of expansion of that city. That expansion has happened up the catchments, up the valleys, and it has occupied those areas. So that's not unique, of course, to that city. These are some statistics about the growth of Indian cities in general. So all cities are growing, and as we know, rural people are moving into the cities, and they've got to live somewhere. So cities are expanding. Mumbai is another example. This is some modelling that shows the expansion to 2030, and you can see that most of these cities expand up valley. So they're moving away from the coast or from the big river. They're moving up the smaller rivers. And so that development is happening up the valley. So my key points I want to make today are, one, the time to make room for the river is when the city is expanding. It's much easier to do that in the peri-rural or rural areas into which the city is expanding. That's the opportunity. This will allow protection of the stream. It will protect the downstream improvements that are being made. I really want to emphasize this point. Across India and across the world now, we're investing in extremely expensive improvements in waterway corridors, which are then threatened by expanding areas in the top, which means we've got more flooding, we've got more sewage, we've got more stormwater. And so as fast as we're fixing the river at the bottom end, it's being undone by the expansion of urbanisation at the top. This is not unique to India. It's happening outside my window in Melbourne right here, and we're struggling to deal with it. So it also allows for future opportunities. The way to think about this is to say to yourself, how would we make our cities better? Well, we'd probably plan them differently than they are now. We'd probably provide all these corridors. Well, we have the opportunity to do that in the growth areas of the city. This will dramatically reduce the cost of future opportunities. If we don't plan it now, it will only get more expensive. And establishing a buffer relies on strong land use planning and regulation. So can I just give one example and then I'll finish. My first example here is the lake loss in Chennai. Now, this is a study called Why Urban India Floods, and from 2016. Their proposition is that urban expansion has meant the loss of major lakes in the catchment. They've shrunk, they've more than halved in area, and that means that they no longer play a flood detention role. Now, those lands could have been protected and you'd still have the ecosystem services there, and you wouldn't have the same downstream urban problems that you have. It would have been much cheaper to have preserved those lakes and then face the flood and hydrology problems you'll get later on. My proposition is the edge of the city, in a lot of ways, is the front line for water-sensitive urban design. Now, sometimes this is not the case, and I think Janu, your example of the in Delhi, where you've got that buffer area already in place, maybe that's the front line, but in most cities, it's the expanding edge of the city as it grows. So one prerequisite for building a water-sensitive city is effective land use planning. So it's not about managing water.
I'm so sorry to cut you, but we'll have to ask you to please wrap up.
Thank you. So land use planning is extremely important. It's also extremely challenging. I don't want to underestimate this. It requires strong political will, and all the pressures are to fully develop and utilise that land. But eventually, everyone will pay for that. So this is an image from your talk, Swati. It's an issue of social justice as well. That's important. So my conclusion is sometimes it is good to keep the riverfront back from the river. Now, this doesn't mean you can't have gaps. It doesn't mean you can't use that area, but we need to plan ahead. More space helps to deliver a water-sensitive city, and the best time to do this is as the city is growing. And that's still happening in India. It's not happening in the Netherlands, which means they have to buy it back. And it's only possible with strong land planning systems and strong political support. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the fascinating presentation, Dr. Rutherford. I'll now hand over to Samrat to moderate the panel discussion. But before Samrat starts the discussion, we'll actually play the Ganga River Anthem for everybody.
भगवती तव तीरे नीरमद्रशनोऽहम् भगवती तव तीरे नीरमद्रशनोऽहम् विगतविषयतृष्णा कृष्णमाराधयामि विगतविषयतृष्णा कृष्णमाराधयामि सकलकलुषभङ्गे स्वर्गसोपानसङ्गे सकलकलुषभङ्गे स्वर्गसोपानसङ्गे तरलतरतरङ्गे देवी गंगे प्रसीद 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 नमामि गंगे 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 स्वर्ग की परछाइयाँ दिखती तेरे आंचल तले माँ तेरी हर बूंद में बहती हुई ममता मिले तू हथेली तन पे फेरे मन को भी निर्मल करे जिस तरह को तू छुए जीवन से उसको सींच दे लेके आया हर कोई बस पाप तुझको सौंपने फिर भी तू बहती चले सबको लगा करके गले स्वाद अमृत का तुझे ही झूम कर जाना प्रसीद 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 नमामि गंगे नमामि जो तेरा खारा तेरे आंसू की धारा कैसे मैं देखूं संतान हो माना है तुझे माँ ये धर्म है मेरा मैं तुझे तेरा वो सम्मान दूं नमामि गंगे नमामि गंगे नमामि गंगे
Thank you, studio, for playing this. Everyone, thanks for your fabulous presentation. I was keep listening the each and every presentation and I was thinking that what should be my next research initiative with Namami Gange. So thanks a lot. Really interesting insights, presentations, and thoughts. We have already ran out by time, almost 7 minutes or so. So I'm not sure if we will be able to have a full-blown moderated session or not. If all of you can stay here for another 5 to 7 minutes, then we can have some sort of a closing remarks. If that is okay with all of you. If it is okay, just please raise your hand. That should be fine. Okay, great. So very quickly, couple of questions. I have noted down a number of points, and this is a question to Owen and Pratima madam, to both of you. You have mentioned about the urbanization and how it is impacting the river, and how some of the water sensitive urban design or water sensitive landscape coming out to absorb some of the impacts. So probably last two key points, if you would like to share as a sort of a closing remarks on that specific issue. Owen, to start with you, and then Pratima madam.
Yeah, thanks, Samrat. So most importantly, as I started off in the presentation, is we need to change the fundamental way that we manage stormwater and look towards the water cycle and rejuvenation within these landscapes. These landscapes from a water and soil perspective are broken, and we need to look at the source of where this can occur rather than end-of-line solutions, and that's something that Ian also touched on. And what that will do is it will start that domino effect at the top of the catchments in rejuvenation and work its way down to the river, rather than the as I noted here, as OP Agarwal said, the city gives to the river currently pollution and a lot of negative impacts. So let's turn that around and let the city give a regenerated ecosystem and ecosystem services to the river.
Thanks, Owen. Pratima madam, your last two
comments.
Yes,
see, I as a landscape architect, plus a vast experience which I got at Namami Gange with a 3 years assignment as Riverfront development expert, I can say one thing. See, I have seen ghats very closely, Uttarakhand, Bihar, UP, West Bengal, Patna. See, the development will happen. The development on the river will happen. The amalgamation of development will happen. As landscape architects or as ecologists or as river sensitive designers, we have to remember that we have to design those spaces, keeping the heritage, keeping the ecology, keeping the conservation, keeping the flora, fauna in mind, that our design has to be more sensitive towards the river, because the river Yamuna there should not be another Yamuna. There should not it should not be the back face of the city. It has to grow together. There were opportunities where we wanted to work on Yamuna in Delhi, but our hands were locked because of NGT. So definitely the designs, the development will happen. If you don't do development, then vandalism will happen. So if you plan your development with little more sensitivities of ecology and more of a greenery, and I look forward that in Namami Gange, Kakuli will take that legacy forward, where we wanted to bring a change in our riverfronts, that let's have more of a sensitive green riverfronts, more of a little biodiversity park riverfronts. So that will there. Development will be there. You have to plan your development sensitively. Urbanization will happen. You can't curb urbanization because the growth has to happen. This is what I wanted to submit.
Samrat, if I could add to that, please. So Pratima is exactly right, but as I alluded to, is that you need more collaborative input across all phases of urban development and urbanisation growth. The old school approach of working in silos, as we see, is inefficient, and it causes negative outcomes and impacts. So as I see, you know, I'm now an engineer in a landscape architect firm, and we know the importance of that interdisciplinary collaboration, because you get the right outcomes and you get the maximum benefits from working together very closely. And that's across stakeholders, communities, and everyone involved.
The smart cities will come throughout all over India. I'm sure the development will happen overseas also, and it is happening. So, but we have to design a little cautiously, and such documents will actually help behind the domain. When we started making the guideline document within Tata also, we realized that there was nothing. And this is the only document which could not have been published because it was not released. So we could not have actually commented that, okay, this is the authentic document of Namami Gange, because technically we cannot officially announce that. But such documents, such policies have to be made, so that will tie the hands of designers. Right now, I'm on the other side where I'm designing a riverfront. So I can understand, because I had a great experience working in Namami Gange, and I know, understand all that. But everybody does not. So such documents actually need of the hour today. And that, Samrat, you'll let me know when is your next document.
Sure. Thanks, Pratima. Thanks, Awan. My next question is to DG sir and Victor. So, I mean, again, going back to my question around the recent IPCC climate change, and while the climatic whiplash or the intensified water cycle brings a lot of stress on this sort of a very close to river sort of infrastructure development. One of them is the riverfront, but also river plays a big role in mitigating some of the climate change issues. So, I mean, I think there is a very interconnectedness at least in the face of climate change driven intensified water cycle. So, two thoughts from your side on how we can leverage that sort of a river and riverine ecosystem to adapt in the face of climate change. You know. So I will ask first DG sir to share some thoughts, and then Victor to you.
Thank you, Samrat. Before I come to your question, let me share your thoughts, like hearing to all the experts, and you have no dearth of collaborative areas where we can work together. So I think this guideline or guidebook is just a kind of beginning, and I think on different aspects which people have said, we can work further. And as you very rightly said, that the connection of riverfront or river and climate change is, and especially in the urban context, if we say urban river, is quite strong. And something which comes to my mind, like we have to have basically two principles. One, we have to go back and learn what was in past, and then how we changed it and what kind of problems we have created. And that insight will come once you have two things. you have to understand that river is not only meant for human beings. So river is there before we were there, and then river will remain. So I think if you understand then the right of the river, that it belongs to biodiversity, aquatic life, flora, fauna, and everything, and that actually makes us also survive. So primarily we have to respect the river's right on its own land. I think there was very nice presentation about room for the river and what exactly we should do to preserve that. And that will also help you in the climate change, because if you have the room, that will act as a sponge, and then also there was a very nice idea about a storm water. We go for a big pipe. I mean, that kind of design. So primarily we are looking at how we can drain out all this excess water. Now that excess water is a problem, but that excess water, if we design it nicely, can also be a solution. So whether it is the urban water body or the riverfront and the room for the land, I mean room for the river, I think if you protect floodplain, if you protect the water bodies, you will get solution for your city life, you will get solution in future for the climate change also. So we have to do that. And another point is, I think I really like that idea what came in the Delhi and Yamuna experience. You have to understand the traditional practices, because they also use this land of the river. But how that practice is good, bad, most of these traditional practices were sustainable in nature, essentially. Though we may have to recognize them, understand them, like even in master plan. Of course, perhaps we will have to interact with them and also give them some suggestions, perhaps go for more eco-friendly or organic farming if you are doing it there and don't use chemicals. But farming as such is a lesser problematic thing than constructing and then completely covering the floodplain with hard concrete construction. So I think we have to take a call, and then we are coming up with a lot of guidelines about floodplain demarcation, and then the permissible thing, desirable thing, and no-go kind of activities. So I think our guidelines, etc., can always emerge. That's a technical job. But essentially, we have to have that will to go with the river, to respect river, give it room, and build with nature. I think that's the primary thing. We have to have consensus and idea. Then I think solutions will come with the experts in the room, and everyone wants to rejuvenate river, whether it is Ganga river in India or any other river, or RI in Melbourne, we saw some example. Everyone wants to protect. But we will have to compromise upon some of our development needs, because ultimately we must realize good ecology is the best economy. I think unless we go with that, we will always have more and more problems.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I mean, I'm taking notes of 2-3 of your comments today. Good ecology is good economy. Then water is one water, and creating water-sensitive communities. I think these are very key words, and we would like to borrow at some point of time. So thanks a lot for all these comments, sir, and giving us the opportunity once again to work on this. I would then go to Victor, your thoughts on that, on the same, please.
Yeah, thank you so much, Samrat. And I think DG sir was hit the nail on the head. Absolutely right. So good. In fact, the economic development does not have to come at the cost of rivers, right? So they're actually quite sustainable economic development cannot happen without integrating rivers into the landscape, into the city's landscape, right? So that's such a brilliant thought there. Coming back to this question on climate change, right? And I'm sure for those of us who are in Delhi, we know that this September was the wettest September in the last 77 years, right? And I just read the headlines a couple of days ago, right? And this is only going to get worse, so with climate change beginning to now manifest its effects, this is going to get worse. And also there is enough evidence that suggests that, water is the primary medium, through which climate change actually manifests its impacts, right? So, I would imagine, all cities are gearing up, to take climate actions, both from a mitigation perspective and from an adaptation perspective as well. And in that regard, urban rivers have a very strong role to play, right? I think that question was very nice, and this kind of reminds me of of a thesis competition that we recently organized. This was we invited a few students to come up with some ideas in terms of, some unique ideas about how to kind of manage urban rivers and some interesting practices. And one of the students came up with this concept of the river can actually help in reducing the urban heat islands, right? And through a modeling technique and through a number of fascinating techniques, and I won't go into details here, but the river actually has a role to play, through the air corridors it creates, through the riparian, and if it is a well-maintained river, this actually has a lot of impact on actually mitigating the impact, so mitigating climate change. And then again, like DG sir pointed out, moving to the other end of the spectrum, when you talk about adaptation, typically there are two things that happen with climate change, right? So either in the water sector, either there would be water scarcity or you would have flooding. And in either of these cases, in context of cities or of course sea level rise, but in any of these three cases, you see a river has such an important role to play here. The Room for the River project that Ian mentioned about, and which DZ Sir also reiterated, so that is such a natural adaptation mechanism, to prevent or to protect cities from fluvial floods, from floods that come from rivers. I'm not talking about the flash floods. Likewise, healthy rivers, and if they are maintained well with the right economic, with the right environmental flows, they supplement the groundwater. That interaction happens well, which also helps to kind of alleviate water scarcity or water shortages threats that we have in our cities, right? So so I think that's a great question. I strongly believe, rivers, urban rivers especially, they have a very vital role to play in any city's combat, to any city's endeavor to combat the effects of climate change.
Thank you, Victor, for the great insight. My last question to Ian and Swati. Swati, you have already mentioned about the social interaction and livelihood associated with, be it a river or urban water bodies, the lakes, wetlands, and someone showed the example of I think you showed the example of the Kolkata wetland and 50% of the vegetable coming out from there. And so my question, and how those areas are getting sort of trespassed or getting into the urban development. And sometimes we forget that these places and these livelihoods, the traditional livelihoods, are co-equal development of the city. I mean, they needs to be considered in the city's development the way you have mentioned. I think my question to you would be that how can you preserve such practices? I mean, you have given examples, but last two, probably the thoughts around that, and probably also to look at some of the critical steps that we really need to think. I mean, summarizing your discussion, and Ian, also I request you to also comment basically the two critical steps around that sort of a social livelihood or traditional parts of the rivers to preserve the traditional cultural linkages. Yeah.
So
sorry, and just one more aspect. Yeah. Also talking about, when you were talking about that, also please bring the social inclusion aspect in your last two comments. Yeah.
Shall I go first?
Yeah, please. Sorry.
Yeah, so like I was saying, the latest master plan for Delhi has made the right steps ahead. We need to take it even further. We need to make these full steps. So it has acknowledged farming. So we need to, what we need to work on next is this recognition of the existing practices. I think typically planners and architects make drawings, and I can say this because I'm an architect myself. We make plans without really seeing what is already there on the land, right? So the first thing that we need is that acknowledgement, that recognition of the practices and people already on ground. And that needs to start with the mapping of these people and these practices, because tomorrow it's very easy to remove what is not even on the map. So that is a very key step. And I think the clues are all in the title of the event, living, thriving rivers. And Kolkata is a good example because Hooghly is a living river. People are their lives are intimately connected in terms of the daily activities which take place along the river. And in Delhi, there is a sort of, there is this divide. So the rest of the city is not linked to the river. And then it's only the farmers and the fisher folks who are linked to the river. So how can we integrate the two together is so important. Instead of coming up with a plan which is only for the rest of the city, which will lead to an eventual gentrification, which none of us want. So how can we acknowledge, respect, map these practices in our future visions, in our riverfront development plans? So this is something I hope the DDA also takes forward. Already in the master plan, the right steps are being taken, but we need to take bolder steps and we need to take these urgently, because what will happen otherwise is urban farming will happen, but people like you and me would be farming. Meaning to say, I mean, already these practices are happening. You know, people are paying rent and then they go farm over the weekend. But the real farmers then would be moved to the periphery of the city. So it's important to have these practices, but also the people who are already conducting these practices. And completely agree with what DG sir said about supporting the farmers in, organic practices, in the fertilizers and the pesticides which are used, because they are the ones who are protecting the floodplains, making sure there is no development on it, maintaining the floodplains as they are. Yeah, I think I might not have had 2 steps for you, but overall sort of viewpoint.
Thanks for the question. I can't really comment too much on the livelihoods of the people in Delhi. I'm not very familiar with that, but I would like to say two things in response. The first one is that if you look at the way that rivers have been managed traditionally, not just in India, but everywhere in cities, it's often to protect people from rivers. Rivers are dangerous. And this is a really important thing. We shouldn't imagine that they've suddenly not become dangerous. They still flood, they still erode, they're still polluted. So we do, a lot of what we do is sort of protecting people from rivers in a sense. But what's happened in the last decade or so, and really what's motivating us in a lot of ways, is the fact that we're now in a lot of ways protecting the rivers from people, and we've got to balance those two things. And this is actually the challenge of urban stream management, is to balance the danger and the threat with the benefit and the opportunity. And that's it's a difficult job, really. It's of all the water management tasks, I think this is becoming more complicated and more difficult. But the second thing I'd like to say about it is that it's the point that I think Victor talked about it in terms of value, and our keynote speaker presented it right at the start. It's about the heart. The thing that's changing is, and I must say the Ganga Anthem was a perfect example of that. What an amazing, I was really emotional listening to that. And this emotional connection that people are getting now with waterways is really changing, not just in India, but all around the world. Why is it changing? I think in a lot of ways because we've sort of almost we've almost got to the end of a lot of these resources. People often, we've damaged them so much, there's not much left, and we're starting to value them. And this idea, and it's probably a good place to finish our discussion, the idea of the Ganga as a living entity that was mentioned before, the idea that the river itself has rights and values, this is a transformative idea, I think. It's not just about humans and amenity. And that idea has actually got real resonance with us here. The Yarra River now is also partially recognised as not as a human, but as a living entity with rights in its own right turn. So I think that sort of brings us full circle in terms of values. The streams are dangerous, but they're also valuable, and they also have values and rights in their own sense. And if we can balance all of those things, then I think we will make, we'll feel that when we're dead, we've made some contribution. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. I know we have overshot by 30 minutes, but these were really interesting discussions. Thank you, Digi sir, once again for, you have stayed here for such a long time and listening through all these discussions. So thanks for your time once again, and thanks for the opportunity. And thanks all the panelists for your very insightful suggestions, feedback, presentations. I think we all have learned at least one or two things out of today's presentation. At least I have done so. So yeah, thanks once again to all of you. Thanks for your time. Yeah.
Thank you, Samrat.
Thank you. Thanks everyone.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.